Okay, welcome back to another episode of Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. This is episode number 17, and I'm that other dude, Andrew, as always, carrying the box of ammo for Heather, who's operating the machine gun in the t-shirt that she is in fact wearing right now.
Yeah.
She's it's not an M, it's a Browning something, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with firearms off the top of my head. So
yeah, you can see it a little bit. Yeah,
it's
this is the original t-shirt.
Yeah, it's the machine gun from the movie Death Wish 3. So in fact, Heather's face has been superimposed onto Charles Bronson, and my face has been superimposed onto his partner Rodriguez, who's I forgot the name of the actor, but either way, I figured that was a good sort of analogy for our working relationship. As Heather holds the machine gun, I carry the ammo, but we're an unstoppable team.
Yes,
so
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, well, it's I think we work really well together in tandem, and it's my privilege to carry the ammunition. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different bands. We're going to kick things off with a group called Spacelord, which we were just talking about before we started recording, is a little bit different from many of the other bands that we've had so far on the show. And then we can discuss briefly a single by Graves and the Bad Weather, and then move on to our next installment of convince Heather to listen to music other than doom. So
which is a tall order, because that's pretty much all I listen to.
Yeah, well, challenge accepted. So Spacelord,
and this is it is a little bit different, because we've listened to a lot of doom bands, and this one is more in the stoner rock category. That's where I would put them. And it's a dynamic duo from Buffalo, New York, and we listened to 3 of their albums and picked a couple songs from each album.
Yeah, before we get into it, I was amazed that it was just 2 people in the band, because of what they're able to sort of bring to it. They're obviously really talented. I know they they split up the instruments, I think, pretty evenly, but yeah, it's a great. We listened to 3 albums, as Heather said. Spacelord, the self-titled album, another one called Indecipher, and a final one called False Dawn. So off of the first album, Spacelord, I had selected That Which Rises and Warlike. So what were your thoughts about That Which Rises?
Yeah, and Spacelord, this is their first full-length album, and it came out in 2017. That Which Rises, the first thing I noticed about Spacelord in general is I noticed how great the vocals are. I'm a vocals person. I that's one of the things in songs that I really enjoy, and the vocals absolutely blew me away. I also love the bluesy feel of the music. This is their first full-length album, and it has a throwback 70s to the 70s kind of feel to it.
Yeah, but one thing I went to Bandcamp to look up what the description was, and it reads, a cosmic blast of stoner rock, an unholy union of riffs and hooks, the mutant offspring of the 70s and 90s. So going into it, that's a pretty good description of what you're going to get. I said for That Which Rises, it seemed like it was a little atonal, but that they were kind of bending and forging it to make it work. And then I said it had sort of a Soundgarden-esque feel to it a little bit, into a sweet riff that goes into like an anthem with definitely a bluesy feel. I got the sense of the blues as well. And then I felt like it would be the song on the soundtrack that was blasting as a group of motorcycles rode into town. Like, you know, that in movies you'll see like, and then all of a sudden the motorcycles cross the town's threshold. It's like a sleepy town somewhere. And yeah, and then I said the vocals during the bridge with an exclamation point, and then I wrote powerful in all caps. So definitely powerful vocals, a dynamite jam. And yeah, I mean, when they said a mutant offspring in the 70s and 90s, I got Soundgarden from that 90s sort of feel. And then
I picked up a little bit of the grunt, a grunge to it.
Definitely. And then Warlike, which
the album art and the way it looks, the perspective of like this overlord looking down at you, it goes with this song so well. It's like the way the song builds, the guitar and the vocals together are a really powerful combination. The ending of the song is really cool. Just the like the very, very last part of it with the guitar, I thought that was really, really, really cool.
Yeah, I felt like this was a song where like a military commander would say, like, when I give the command, unleash hell, and then this song would play. And for me, I decided to dip a little bit into the lyrics. So some of the lyrics, time to bow down to your master, and please God, let this be a dream. I thought those were some really powerful, specific lyrics that I enjoyed. It was also really melodic, and I liked the ending. Reminded me of sort of like dominoes falling, with the way that it was put together. So two killer jams off of their self-titled debut album, which is also called Spacelord, and then that segued into the next album, Indecipher, where we listened to Cruiserweight and then The Mission.
Yeah, and this album came out in 2018, and Cruiserweight, really nice heavy guitar groove. I like how he sings about setting ourselves free and you ain't heard the last of me. I wanted to mention that the singer is also a writer. So, that when you mentioned in the last song, the lyrics and the writing, he's also a writer, which I thought that was pretty interesting. And I also like the sci-fi and the fantasy horror influences.
Well, I went a bit different in my interpretation for this one of the title. Cruiserweight I took to be the boxing weight class, which was new to I think the 80s. They invented a 190-pound limit was the new weight class. So when I saw Cruiserweight, that's what I thought of, although my guess is that the title doesn't have anything to do with boxing. With regard to the song, I said it was still very bluesy, but again, much more of a stoner rock. I liked the melodic chorus. It had a psychedelic solo, and then I wrote that the song was real precise, which I honestly don't remember what I had meant when I wrote that. But again, it's a little bit different than a lot of the bands we've had on the show before, but just as enjoyable. Really great to sort of introduce something new to the playlist. So yeah. That was Cruiserweight, and then The Mission, which is also off Indecipher.
Yeah, and The Mission, I really think this should be your theme song. Besides being an awesome, well-rounded song, it describes you so perfectly. I'm a new guy, try to understand. I'm on a mission. It's it's a great song, and it closes out the album. It's the last song on this album, so it closes out the album on a high note.
Well, I may have to incorporate that into my theme music then. I thought the mission.
It's like it was written for you, actually.
Well, we'll have to find out if I ended up influencing the song in any way. I somehow doubt it, but it would be nice to think that that there is a connection. I said it was ominous and subtle, like a wave that was building, like an ocean wave that was building. Great head thumping riff. I wrote I was amazed it's only two people. Not that they're the only ones playing the instruments at the same time, but just that it's the sort of the brainchild of two. I said the chorus was what made it for me, and I loved the Banshee's wail vocals at the end. So another great jam. And then that segues into the final album, False Dawn. We listened to Broken Teeth Ritual and M60.
Yeah, and False Dawn came out in 2021. Broken Teeth Ritual, this is my favorite album by them so far. This song is stellar, definitely my favorite on the album. I wondered if their band name comes from the Monster Magnet song. My favorite singer is Chris Cornell, and I hope they don't mind me saying that I picked up some Soundgarden, so I picked it up too, the Soundgarden influences. There's some different elements in the song, like a little spoken word sample, and the guitar is just dead sexy. And that's the thought that just ran through my head. It's just sexy.
I feel like they should use that as a pull quote on their next album. Just the guitar is dead sexy.
Yeah.
That sort of reminds me on in the movie Almost Famous, where William Miller says to Stillwater's guitarist Russell, the guitar is incendiary. Do you remember that scene?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember the movie about the guy? So it's when he first goes to cover the band and he's waiting at the stage door with all the ladies who are Band-Aids, and then the band shows up and he says, can I interview you guys for a Cream magazine? And they say, we only play music for the fans, get out of here. And then he says, like, Ed, Paul, Larry, Tom, I'm a huge fan of your band. I think you guys writing the album and producing it yourselves instead of Glyn Johns, that was the way to go. And Russell, the guitar sound is incendiary. And then he starts to walk away and they go, wait, come back. I'm incendiary too. And then that's how he ingratiates himself in the band.
Yeah.
With the band, I should say.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, Spacelord, if you're watching or you hear about this, you could just have, in quotations, dead sexy Heather Lawson. And that's a seal of approval right there. You may sell an extra 500 units. Who knows? But I said Broken Teeth Ritual, like a countdown for a launch. I felt like this time I liked some of the samples that they included as well, some of the spoken word stuff. It turned into like a bluesy sludgy from the ambient sounds. I said it was simple but powerful. The second half, they were just sculpting the sound, making it awesome. And then for some reason, I wrote, man, them Derringer bullets are weak, powerful weak from The Simpsons, which has nothing to do with anything, but that's just how my mind works. So, all right. Well, if I've embarrassed myself enough, we went on to M60 was the last track we listened to.
Yeah, the range on the vocals is absolutely insane. The song is anthemic. I refuse to die, and it keeps, getting higher, it gets higher and higher. And the song, you can probably tell why I chose Spacelord to feature and to talk about. Awesome vocals, incredible guitar arrangements, groovy bass lines, powerful drums, music that makes you feel good, and music that you want to share with your friends.
All right. So that could be the press release next time. You got a pull quote and a press release. What else do you need? Yeah, M60 I said could be the favorite of the songs we've listened to of my, of the 6. I said it was sort of like a bluesy Led Zeppelin type guitar riff that felt like it sort of went into like the Kashmir, their song Kashmir, that sort of like driving riff. And then I just wrote maybe my favorite question mark. So I guess, but again, this was certainly a different sound than we've heard before. The way the way the songs were put together, the vocals, the genre. We've had stoner musicians on before, or we've had elements of that, but this was sort of a unique amalgam of all that stuff. So I have to tip my cap to you, Heather, for suggesting we listen to Spacelord.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them.
I did.
Yeah.
Very much so. And what's good is that we listened to an upcoming single from Graves in the Bad Weather, which is also somewhat bluesy. So it's like a kind of a nice segue into a similar, it's obviously much different than Spacelord, but there's certain similar elements I found. So yeah, Graves in the Bad Weather. I believe the track is called Bad Woman. And when I went to their Bandcamp description, it's doom blues with a southern gothic flavor and country fried licks, just like Mama used to make. So I felt like I had heard them before. I think I had featured one of their songs on a Fistful of FACEFUL low a long time ago. And I remember thinking, wow, this is great, sort of like bluesy rock and roll with a dynamite female vocalist. And essentially, yeah, the doom blues with a southern gothic flavor and country fried. I don't know what country fried licks necessarily are, but they sound delicious.
Maybe they're crunchy.
Crunchy yeah. I'm always on the lookout for contemporary bands that I can sort of add to my playlist to replace bands that I really love who just aren't making music anymore. So whenever I hear of a contemporary group that I like Graves in the Bad Weather, it's like, oh, let me make sure to bookmark this so I don't forget it. So like Spacelord has found its way into the playlist. Graves in the Bad Weather has found its way into the playlist. And I would definitely endorse, if you're a fan of sort of that southern bluesy rock and roll with kind of a gothic feel to it, but like that southern gothic, then this is a band definitely that you'd want to check out.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. And then we for the next, I mixed it up a little bit in terms of the convincing Heather to listen to music from other genres. So this time I sent you 2 tracks that were by 4 bands, so it was 2 different versions of each song. And I sort of went with revisiting the punk genre a little bit with Hybrid Moments. So I sent Heather Hybrid Moments by the Misfits, which is also covered by a group called Helvetia. The original track is very much a straightforward punk jam. And then Helvetia did sort of a minimalist, like garage rock. I don't even know what you would say, but
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on both?
Well, the Misfits, it's a short song. It's just a little over a minute. It's short and fast paced. It's funny because one thing I thought was Glenn Danzig's vocal delivery is a lot different than the stuff that he does in Danzig. It's like his delivery is a lot different. And the Hybrid Moments that the cover, it's much slower and it's a bit longer, and it's still a short song, but they added like a whole nother minute, so it's a slowed down and it's like a pared down version. And I thought it had some really nice, it has some vocal harmonies in it, which I thought were really nice.
Yeah, well, the original Hybrid Moments is one of my favorite songs. And I had wanted to play that for you in the initial punk episode we did, or where I tried to convince you to listen. But I also felt like Misfits are a really well-known landmark band that didn't really need, like Misthetics probably isn't as well-known of a band, so I wanted to try and include them. But then last episode when I played Brad Brains, I was like, well, if I'm going to play well-known bands, I may as well go back. Plus, I really like the cover that Helvetia does, where it's just as powerful, but slowed down and a little bit, it's just interpreted differently. So it was an excuse to kind of have my cake and eat it too. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, I sort of figured that there would be elements of the original that you would appreciate, but I know that it's not really your tempo. And, so I sort of was like, you know what, I'll throw this out there because I think it's worth exploring it. And then hopefully there will be certain things that you appreciated. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because obviously Danzig's vocal delivery is much different now. Once he went into more of a bluesy metal delivery, but yeah. you can hear sort of the seeds of it planted in his.
You can. It just it's amazing though, how going from his vocal delivery in the Misfits to Danzig, and it's amazing the progression, and how different it is.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to think like they've been around for 50 years. It's crazy, like, and the evolution that's happened. The other song that I selected for you, the original, it's called Ghost Rider. The original is by a group called Suicide, who were really sort of influential in the punk movement and the new wave. It was 2 guys, one of them sang and one of them played keyboards, and that was it. That's the band. And I think they had a drum machine. So really inventive. I think actually, I can't confirm this, but I think they had a really big influence on Bruce Springsteen, because they have a bunch of songs off their debut album that are really dark, um, sort of like storytelling. They have a song called Frankie Teardrop, and it's about a guy who works at a factory who's got like a wife with a baby on the way, and he can't take care of them. So it's sort of that ominous, kind of lyrically ominous, but also there are a lot of really spooky like sounds in the song, and a lot of like vocally he like actually tries to, I don't know if he tries to scare you, but I remember there was a radio show that had a contest. It was called the Frankie Teardrop Contest, and it was see if you could listen to the song on headphones in the scariest place ever. So people would call in and say, I tried to listen to the song at 2 a.m. in a cemetery and I couldn't do it. It freaked me out too much. So I digress. But I think like lyrically and subject matter and just sort of the method of how they went about writing the songs had an impact on Springsteen, who I think Nebraska was his sort of the impact they had on him when he wrote Nebraska. It was like, let me look more, at a darker element of sort of growing up in a small town and different subjects like that. So does that make sense? I feel like I've
Yeah.
been rambling for the last, but yeah, so Ghost Rider based on the comic book, and I think that's actually where they got their band name from. There was a comic book issue that was something like the Crimson Suicide of Ghost Rider, and they ended up just going with Suicide as their band name. But
I really liked it. I couldn't believe it was from the 70s. It sounds much more modern than that. It's a fast-paced like synth punk. It just seems way ahead of its time.
yeah, the album I think came out in 77, but I think a lot of the things they were doing were really groundbreaking. I think when you think of like influential punk bands from that era, you don't really think of a singer and a synthesizer player being the only members of the band. But I think their attitude, their style, like what they wrote about, what they sang about, how they did it, had a really big impact in the scene.
And I can definitely relate to a small town, like growing up in a small town. Like people have this romantic idea of what it's like to grow up in a small town and how nice it must be. And I can definitely relate to telling about the scary parts of growing up in a small town and what how it can be an absolute nightmare as well. So I can definitely relate to that too.
Well, on your own, should you want to, you should check out Frankie Teardrop as just a song, because it is a really amazing song. I have never listened to it the whole way through because there's so much lore with it now after I'd listened to the radio show, and like people unable to listen to it with their headphones on by themselves in a freaky place. So I've just sort of mythologized it too much. But I think maybe tonight I will finally listen to all of Frankie Teardrop, and then we can touch base about it. But
I can definitely fill you in on the stuff that will really scare you about small towns.
That I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I mean, during one of our previous episodes, when you talked about getting up in the morning to detassel corn, that was frightening, and that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I definitely feel like you're going to be swinging the clubs, but yeah. So Henry Rollins does a cover of Ghost Rider, and his cover actually ended up on the Crow soundtrack. That's where I first heard it. And this one I thought was much more in your wheelhouse because he slows it down a lot and he sort of develops a really cool riff. Even though it's the same lyrics, it's just a much different vibe, a much different feel, different intensity. So I sort of figured this would be a good one because it would have a lot of elements in it that you already enjoy.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Henry Rollins. And The Crow, the soundtrack, I've heard a lot of people say that that's the greatest soundtrack ever. I couldn't hear, like, in this version, I couldn't really tell what the similarities were to the original version. It's like completely different. Like he took the song and turned it on its head and definitely made it completely their own.
Yeah, I except for the lyrics, I think it is completely different. There's not a single similarity throughout. But again, I was like, oh, this is close to what Heather enjoys listening to anyway. I may as well include that. I'm just really glad you liked the original. I was sort of rolling the dice, like, well, maybe yes, no, who knows? But my heart always goes fluttering when I've suggested a song that ends up being something that you enjoy, because then that's the goal. So
yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you liked aspects of Hybrid Moments, in terms of the cover, or even the original, and certainly glad you liked the original for Ghost Rider. I'm not as surprised that you liked the Rollins remake because that's just a great jam anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a win. It's always a win when I suggest something, then you think it's okay. So
Yeah.
And then and you knocked it out of the park with Spacelord. So well done on that. So for those of you watching, Heather has cobbled together a playlist that's on YouTube. Check out Graves in the Bad Weather. Their song, I believe, comes out on the 11th, called Bad Woman. And then Spacelord has a bunch of albums that you can check out on Bandcamp. So
and I put Spacelord's full albums, so you can listen to all 3 full albums on the playlist. But I wasn't able to get the song Bad Woman on there because it's not on YouTube, so I wasn't able to get that song on the playlist.
Yeah, that one I think you can listen to it on SoundCloud for now, and then it'll be released on the 11th, so you'll be able to get it then. But you can take our word for it that we both enjoyed it, and of course we'll be back next week with new jams. So hang in there until then.
Yes. Thank you for watching and have a good week.
Yes, thank you.